When I was in my early 20s, I moved to a small town that was about 2 hours away from the city where I grew up. Real estate prices were way too high in the city, but things were more affordable when you get into the smaller communities. The house that I found was old but large. It had the kind of character that you don't find in modern buildings. It was made of red brick, and it was 2 full stories with an unfinished basement. I got a good deal on it because it was a foreclosure from the bank. Not a steal, but I'd say that it was a good 5 to 10% below the market at the time. I was excited about the move, looking forward to starting a new chapter of my life. One of my friends was going to rent one of the rooms from me, so I would have a bit of help with the mortgage, and I wouldn't have to be alone. He wasn't coming until a few months after I moved in, though, because he was finishing an internship in the city. Therefore, I was all alone when I moved in. My parents helped me with the move, but they only stayed for a single night. It was just me in that big old house. The neighborhood was nice enough. People kept to themselves for the most part. I didn't talk to too many people for the first week or so. There seemed to be some older people and some younger families, and not too many single guys like myself. One day as I was walking up the path to my front door, a man approached me. He was middle-aged, and as soon as I saw him, I could already tell that he was pissed off. He stopped in front of me and tried to start a conversation. Not wanting to be rude, I talked to him for a bit. For all I knew, he could have been one of my neighbors. Then after a few minutes, I tried to excuse myself, but the man wouldn't let me go. He still looked angry, but I could tell that he was trying to hide it. As we continued to talk, the man admitted that he used to own my house. He gave me some complicated story about how the bank screwed him over. Honestly, it sounded like some kind of a conspiracy theory. It was that crazy. I was taken aback. I hadn't expected to meet the previous owner, especially not like this. But what really caught me off guard was his attitude. He was angry, almost aggressive. I didn't know how to react. It was a strange and uncomfortable confrontation. I tried to be polite, but I just wanted to get away from him. Things went on for a while longer. At one point, I tried to turn and walk away from him, but the man grabbed my arm. I turned around and looked at him, and I yanked my arm out from his grip. I almost shoved him out of instinct, but stopped myself at the last moment. By then, I'd had enough. I told him less politely this time to leave, and that he had no right to come back to my property and harass me. I may have used some colorful language too. I turned and went into my house, locking the door behind me. I remember shaking my head in disbelief. It was such a bizarre encounter. I thought about what happened all night. My friend wasn't moving in for another 2 months, but I wished he was there already. I double-checked all the locks before going to bed, something I hadn't felt the need to do before. I didn't see the man again for the next few days, but I did finally talk to some of my neighbors. I was chatting with a guy who lived across the street. His name was Paul, and he was only a few years older than me. I asked him about the man who used to live in my house. Paul laughed as soon as I brought it up. Apparently the guy had a reputation for being a bit of a psycho in the neighborhood. Paul said he would call the cops for the most random reasons. Noise complaints when there was no noise were among his favorites. Another night the next week, I went to bed as usual. It was around midnight, but I was still awake. Suddenly I heard a noise from downstairs. At first I thought it was just a creak in the house, but then I heard it again. It was a soft clattering sound, like someone moving around. I listened closer and started to hear what sounded like footsteps. My heart began to race, got up quietly and crept to my bedroom door. I listened for a moment, trying to figure out what was happening. The noises continued, and I realized I had to check it out, so I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police if I needed to. I slowly made my way down the stairs, my phone in one hand. As I neared the bottom of the stairs, I could tell there was a light on. There was no way I had forgotten to turn it off. I was sure of it. Then as I peeked down around the corner, I saw him. It was that man, the previous owner who had confronted me before. As soon as I saw him, he saw me too. "Get the hell out of here," I yelled. The man barely responded. He didn't say anything, and he didn't move. I then turned and ran back up the stairs. I locked myself in my bedroom and called the police. Told them there was an intruder in my house and gave them my address. The wait for the police to arrive was the longest and most terrifying few minutes of my life. I could hear the man downstairs, but he didn't try to come up. Maybe he was looking for something, or maybe he was just crazy. When the cops finally arrived, I heard them enter the house, calling out for the intruder to show himself. After what felt like an eternity, they came up the stairs to get me. They had found the man and arrested him. I talked to the police and told them about the confrontation that happened before. It turned out that the man had a long criminal record and the police knew him well. I later found out that he lost the house in part because of his legal problems, lawyer fees, and time away from work. I don't know what happened to him after that. Once my friend moved in, I was able to relax more. We had a lot of good times in that house. It was a shame that things started out the way they did. I stayed in that place for almost 10 years and sold it when I decided to move away to take another job. I used to have a job at a fast food place near my parents' house. I was saving up for college, and this job was all I could find back then. The restaurant was located on the outskirts of our town, and it usually got pretty quiet late at night. It was near the highway, and there were some other fast food places there, with a large parking lot in the middle. It was never full during my late shifts, because not very many people came in at the late hours. One particular evening, I remember it was a Wednesday, I was closing up alone. The counter was at one end, the entrance was on the other. The bathroom was down a corridor to the right of the counter. Beyond the registers, there was a storage room that was behind the counter. We kept the door open while we were working, but it locked, and we would close it at night. It locked from the outside, but there was a latch on the inside, just in case anyone was stupid enough to lock themselves in. I'm way too smart for that, though. It was around 15 minutes to midnight, which is when we closed. There were only 2 people in the dining area, an older man having a coffee, and a younger guy who didn't buy anything. He was just sitting there staring at his phone, probably stealing our internet. I went to check the bathroom one last time before close. I cleaned up a little bit. I was maybe in there for 5 minutes. When I entered the dining area again, both guys were gone. I finished closing up, which included some cleaning, sweeping the floors, and some other small things. Then I went to the storage room, turned off the lights, and closed the door. Once I was done, I turned off all the lights in the main area and headed outside. Once I locked up, I looked at my car in the parking lot. It was almost empty. My car was parked right in front, facing the window of the restaurant. I walked over to it. I remember there was a slight chill in the air, a sign that fall was approaching. I got into my car, ready for the short drive home. But before I started my engine, something made me look back up at the restaurant. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe I caught something out of the corner of my eye. I looked closely and thought I saw a movement through the window, and I noticed a light, like a flashlight but dim. I thought somebody had broken into the place. The light could have been a cell phone. For a moment I sat there, trying to decide what to do. My first thought was to drive away, to get out of there as fast as I could, and then call the cops. I know that's what I should have done, but I was too curious not to check it out. As I got closer, I couldn't see anything. Maybe it was my tired mind playing tricks on me, I thought. But then, the light appeared again. There was definitely someone in there. I didn't know whether he saw me or not, so I quickly ran back to my car. After driving to the other side of the parking lot, I dialed 911, my hands shaking slightly. I explained to the dispatcher what I had seen, and then gave them the location of the restaurant. They told me to stay where I was, and to wait for the officers to arrive. While I waited, I kept staring at the restaurant, half expecting somebody to burst out, but the whole place remained still as far as I could tell from a distance. When the police arrived, I talked to them for a few brief minutes, then they headed in. I watched from my car as they entered through the back door. Their flashlights lit up the place. I stood next to my car watching, and eventually they came out with a man in handcuffs. It was hard to tell, but I was pretty sure it was the younger guy who was in the dining room, stealing our internet. He must have managed to hide somewhere while I was cleaning the bathroom. Still not sure exactly where, but I suspect he was hiding in the storage room. Somehow I managed to miss him when I was closing up. The next day, I discussed what happened to my manager and one of my coworkers. They were both concerned and thankful that I was okay. That was a relief for me, because it was kind of my fault. Nobody seemed to blame me, though. The intruder didn't manage to steal anything, and there wasn't really any damage either. It's just creepy to know that he was hiding in that room when I was alone. My name is Michelle, and I was born and raised in a secluded Appalachian farming community during the 1970s and 1980s. This happened when I was in my mid-teens in the late 80s. This part of my life is one of the hardest and most painful to discuss. My biological father mistreated us, and thankfully, finally decided to leave me and my mom. I had an older sister, but she had gotten married and moved out a few months before this happened. My mom had gotten mixed up with one of those Pentecostal churches, and they ruined my life. I wasn't allowed to have friends unless they were from the church. No movies or music because I could get demons from them. I was mistreated by my father, and had trauma that they saw as a character flaw or a spiritual affliction. They thought I had a demon. It was extremely toxic, and a few times they said I was demon-possessed. They held me down trying to do exorcisms. I was angry, I was depressed, and I was all alone. All my mom cared about was that stupid church. When my biological father abandoned us, my mom had an emotional crisis and left me too. There I was. No money, no electricity, no food, no phone, no transportation, in a house deep in the mountains. I had gotten into a huge argument with my mom over the electricity and why she left me like she did. I was in a rage. I was hurting badly, and it made me feel nothing but rage. She got into her car and left me. She was going to get my sister to gang up on me again. I guess my emotional state was demonic to her. That church was poison. I sat in my room in a rage, crying, all alone in the dark. I had not eaten anything all day or the day before, and I was not feeling like my life had any hope at all. I sat there. There was nothing I could do. Then I heard a loud crashing, like somebody busting through the back door. I sat quietly and listened, then I heard it again. I want to describe my house. My biological father built it with my grandfather, and the back door was held closed with a homemade knife. We slipped through the gap between the door and the door frame, but if you hit it hard a few times, it would shake and fall out, then the door would open. So I thought my mom was being a jerk, or maybe it was my biological father. As I sat on my bed listening to the house, I heard movement. It sounded like a huge animal was slowly moving everything in the house, approaching the room I was in. Chairs were moving, furniture moving, and dishes breaking. These were aggressive sounds. They were scary. But then I felt something else. The worst feeling I've ever felt in my life. It was something dark, angry, and violent. I felt like whatever it was, if it got me, I would die. It felt cruel and evil. The more noises it made as it went through the house, the worse it felt. My room was set up in a way that you had to go through one bedroom in order to get to mine. I listened to it as it was in the hall. I felt cold and nauseous. I heard it in the room right outside mine. I grabbed a candle and jumped out the window, then ran like hell. It was a mile or a mile and a half to my best friend's house, and I ran there, barefoot and scared to death. I called my boyfriend and told him what happened. He and his dad came to help me. They came right away to get me, and when we pulled into my driveway, we pulled in behind my mom's car. She and my sister were sitting in the car watching the house. I knocked on her window and asked her why she was messing with me. She looked terrified, and the color left her face. She and my sister said they were just watching. I was looking up at the house, and when I looked up to the window, I saw the curtain fall, as though somebody had been holding it open to look out. My boyfriend and his dad charged the house. The door was locked. We unlocked the door and went in. When we looked around, the house was destroyed. Dishes were broken, the wood stove was moved, and the pipe was ripped from the wall. Furniture was thrown around. My pet bunny was killed by something breaking its little neck, but no one was in the house. The back door was locked, my bedroom door was locked, and my room was destroyed. It was seconds after the curtain fell that we went into the house. No one could have gotten away that fast. It was impossible. I refused to stay. My boyfriend's family took me in when they saw the neglect I was suffering. I went back to that house a few days later. My mom and sister had removed everything I owned, even my bed and clothes. They threw it all in the yard and burned them. It had demons, they said. My boyfriend married me to keep me from having to go back to that place. I'm in my 50s now, and I'll never forget the darkness and fear that I felt in that house that night. It was the worst thing I've ever felt in my life. I never found out what happened that night. I had 4 witnesses to the curtain falling and the condition of the house, also to the fact that the house was empty, but it still feels unreal. This incident happened to me when I was 15 years old, back in 1999. I grew up in Southern California, in the suburbs of Los Angeles. We moved to our home when I was about 6 years old. I lived with my mom, my 3 brothers, and my little sister. I'm the middle child, which wasn't easy as a kid. I often felt overlooked. I also have ADHD and high-functioning autism, which made me feel even more isolated. I'll give you an overview of my town and the houses, so you can have an idea of where I grew up. When we moved there, our city was pretty much all dirt roads and citrus orchards. It was common to see coyotes, deer, rattlesnakes, and even mountain lions. Our house was up a road that looked like a dead-end street, but the street curved around and led into our neighborhood. It was remote and creepy. Our house was the second house on the street. I guess you could say that it was your typical middle-class neighborhood. We had a huge canyon behind our house, literally right next to our backyard. We loved to play in the canyon as kids. There was a big river in there. My siblings and I would ride our boogie boards down it. There were even some waterfalls to play in as well, and small fish and frogs in the river. As an adult, I cringe to think of how I'd gone down in that canyon alone at such a young age. I definitely would not let my son go down there alone. When I was about 10, the police discovered a dead body in the lake down in the canyon. They ended up building a dam and draining it. We weren't able to play in our beloved river anymore. I guess it was for the best though. Years later, I discovered that wasn't the first body they had found down in the canyon. They ended up draining it because somebody kept dumping bodies down there in the lake. In 3rd grade, I also had a friend who lived down the street from me who was murdered. I guess her dad left the house for business. The mom and children were murdered while he was gone. They never solved that case. They also never solved the cases involving the bodies in the canyon behind our house either. Anyway, back to my house. We had a pretty big yard, and even a goat and horses, a pig, cats, and dogs. We also had a big barn that was up against the canyon where our animals were kept at night. We had a steep driveway, and our street was also pretty steep because it led up into the mountains. Between our home and the rest of the neighborhood, there was a trail, kind of a slab of land with overgrown shrubbery. There was also a huge electrical tower in the middle of the trail. The bushes along the path were really tall and overgrown, which added to the creepiness of my neighborhood. All the kids at my school considered our street to be the creepiest in town. The previous owner of our house died in the house. I have no idea why my mom even bought it. She must have gotten a killer deal. All jokes aside, I really hated that house. Never felt safe in it, and moved out as soon as I turned 18. It was a 3-level home, so the layout was kind of weird. We had a pretty sturdy front door that creaked when you'd open it. The living room, kitchen, and dining room were on the first level of the house. The tri-level part of the first floor led down some stairs into our family room. Then there was a small hallway and a bathroom. My bedroom was next to the bathroom downstairs. My room was kind of tucked away in a weird spot in the hallway. There was a little piece of wall that obscured my view of the family room from my bedroom door. Another weird aspect of the house was that there was a huge cutout in the wall of the kitchen. It was essentially a window built into the kitchen wall that overlooked the family room. I could see into the kitchen from the hallway where my room was, thanks to this weird cutout. The house was built in 1970, and my parents had done some very strange renovations over the years. Mine was the only bedroom on the first floor. Everyone else's bedrooms were upstairs. My mom had given me the downstairs bedroom so I wouldn't have to share a room with my little sister anymore. I'd have a full-blown panic attack when my sister would mess up the bedroom. I liked being downstairs because I loved being alone. I'm a proud hermit and introvert, but I'm not gonna lie, it was creepy at night being all alone downstairs. I'd often sleep with my dog in the room and close my bedroom door. I'd usually lock my door because I'm a paranoid type of person. Other neurodivergent listeners will understand what I mean. Late one night, my dog was scratching at the door, probably wanting to get out and grab a drink from his water bowl down the hall. The house had 2 back doors. One led directly into my restroom from outside, and the other led directly into our laundry room. Both doors had locks, but they didn't even work half the time. I let my little dog out of the room, and I could have sworn that I shut my bedroom door and then went back to bed. I honestly never leave my door open when I sleep, not even a crack. I ended up waking up confused a few hours later. I looked at my clock and it was 5 a.m., way too early to get up for school. I never woke up this early. I was also confused as to why I was hanging halfway out of my bed. I always sleep with my head on the left side, never the right. It was like somebody had picked me up and laid me on the opposite side of my bed. Being autistic, I like things being a specific way every single night. Door closed, sleeping on the left side of my bed, alarm going off at 7 a.m. to wake me up for school. I rubbed my eyes, feeling confused and kind of off. I felt weird, like something wasn't right. I laughed to myself, thinking I probably had a crazy dream, and that I had moved in my sleep, which by the way never happens. I looked around my room, and I was very surprised to see that my door was slightly open. I was certain I had closed the door after letting the dog out. I suddenly felt wide awake. I don't know why I didn't go back to sleep. I felt like I needed to get up quickly and get out of my room. I walked towards my bedroom door and opened it. The house was pitch black, except for a dim light that my mom always left on in the kitchen. As I walked out of my room, I went to go to the bathroom. When I did, I could have sworn I saw the figure of a man standing in my kitchen through the weird wall cutout. I thought nothing of it and told myself I must still be half asleep. I brushed it off and continued my way into the restroom. I locked the door behind me and quickly turned on the shower. After finishing my shower, I opened the bathroom door. I was surprised to see my mom standing right in front of me with her arms crossed and a scowl on her face. I looked at her confused and asked her what was wrong. She immediately started yelling at me and saying, "I told you not to have friends over on school nights." She went on, and I was so confused. I had no idea what she was talking about. I stopped my mom and told her I didn't have any friends over, and that I had no idea what the heck she was talking about. She said I must be lying to her. In her defense, she had caught me sneaking in some of my friends through my bedroom window a few weeks prior to this. I kept telling her I wasn't lying and started getting really upset. She was accusing me of something I didn't do. She must have realized at some point that I was telling the truth. All of a sudden, she got really quiet. She looked pale and her eyes got wide. "Do you promise you didn't have any friends over?" she said very calmly. Again, I bluntly said, "Yes, I promise. Why?" She just stood there staring at me. Again, I asked her what was wrong. She hesitated and then began talking again. She told me she had woken up early at around 5 a.m. She was laying in bed reading a book when she heard me downstairs. That was when I opened and shut the bathroom door and turned on the shower. Right after she heard me turn on the shower, she heard heavy footsteps moving quickly on the wooden floor downstairs. She said it sounded like a person with heavy boots on made their way from the kitchen all the way to the front door. She then heard the front door swiftly open and then close. My mouth dropped open and I just stared at her. Couldn't believe it. I told her I saw the figure of a man in the kitchen while I was walking to the restroom, but I thought I was just seeing things. She didn't say anything else and walked off. I was so creeped out and didn't know what to think. I'm still not sure why my mom didn't take it very seriously or try to comfort me because I was having a full-blown anxiety attack. Later that day, she changed the locks on all the doors and even put latches on the doors. She never spoke of it again or acknowledged my fear when I speak about the incident. I don't know if she even called the police. I doubt she did. I was so scared from that point on. This incident made me hate our house even more. My mom ended up brushing it off and tried to make herself believe that I must have been lying and that I probably had friends over. Even to this day, she rolls her eyes and says, "It was your friends." When this happened, she was going through a divorce with my stepdad, so she thought it might have even been him or a really creepy neighbor. After that night, I began making sure to lock my bedroom door and window. We never found out who had come into our house that morning. To this day, it turns my stomach thinking about what could have happened to me. I would have handled the situation completely differently. There's no way I would have brushed it off. Maybe my intense maternal protection traits stem from the childhood incidents I had. This definitely wasn't my first or last scary experience in that house. Still have nightmares about what could have happened to me. How did they get into my house? Was one of the doors unlocked? Did they come into my room? Were they watching me sleep? Why didn't they steal anything? My mom didn't hear a car start up or drive off. So were they on foot? Did they come in from the canyon? Did they hide along that sketchy trail in front of my house? These are the questions that I still continue to ask myself, and they scare me to my core. That person left my door cracked open and then went to the kitchen. I truly believe the person was planning to come back to my room. What if I had walked right into him in the hallway on my way to the bathroom? What if he was in my bathroom? I have no idea why I felt so compelled to get up early that morning. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't gone to the bathroom. I don't know who the hell that was, but I truly believe that they did not have good intentions.